We are now 6 games into the third phase of AFC World Cup qualification, and here's what we have to show for it. 7 points to somehow leave us second in the group. 4 draws that, whilst keeping us in contention, only adds to the frustration. 4 opponents sat precariously below, all just 1 point away from hunting the Socceroos down. 2 coaches who, whilst do offer a fair few differences in management and formation, yet, however, both are yet to crack the age-old question of how to get the Socceroos to put their foot down on an opposition. And one giant of Asian football perched above, Japan. Both the ease of how they got there and the calmness of their path ahead, the epitomisation of our envy. We'll have our thoughts on the Bahrain game, the 2-2 draw, then a look ahead to Unite Round on this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. My name is Lachlan Avil. Joining me today, fresh off the bench once again. We seem to get these little guest appearances from you every once a month or so. Chris Macpherson, it's good to have you on board again.
Good to be back, Lockie.
And Jacob Stevens, we're getting away really quick tonight because we know you need a little bit of an early night in bed. Right. You've got a bit of an early start as well.
4 a.m. wake up to get to the airport for 5 for my flight at 6. So it's gonna be an early night for me. I think I say that I'll end up staying up until like 11 because I'm an idiot. But the plan is an early night.
That's the prep that your coach wants to hear ahead of the big Unite round.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
And not only that, but we've got you into the Soccer AM Top Bins Challenge on Saturday as well. So we need you well prepared.
Oh God,
you got to be in good form. But we're going to that's going to be good fun as well. Christian Montegan, hello to you as well.
Good evening, lads.
Yes, well, we are here, of course, a couple of days after the Socceroos draw against Bahrain in the early hours of the morning. Another frustrating draw for the Socceroos. Chris, you and I spoke on YouTube directly after the game, so we're going to let Jacob and Christian mostly have their piece here. So, Jacob, I'll come to you first. It was a crazy game in a crazy group that leaves qualification on a crazily fine line.
Yeah, I guess the best thing to take away from this is the fact that Australia aren't alone in being in this situation.
No.
It could be worse where it's like Australia are the only team that haven't been able to put it together, but it's all of the group essentially have done the same thing. So, I mean, if there is, a silver lining to it all, it's that. But this was really a big missed opportunity. It should have been out of contention by the end of that first half. And even with the little, that crazy goal that put Bahrain back in it, and then, another deflection off a defender to get the second one. And, even with those, Australia still should have won with what they were able to create and sort of, I thought they showed a really good mentality, to be honest. I think the early goal helped, and it sort of, calmed them down a bit and allowed them to play some good football. But just, Yengi's got his 2 goals, but could have had 4, 5, 6 with the number of chances that he had. And I think, that was always one of the biggest, his biggest issues when he was at Adelaide was just converting the chances. He would find himself in good positions. He's really good with his movement, but it is putting the ball in the back of the net that he struggled with. And, he managed to get 2 in this game, but that's because he was presented with about 20 good opportunities. So, you'd hope he'd put a couple away. Yeah, look, I mean, I'm not sure how much more to add that, you guys weren't able to cover in that piece on YouTube. But yeah, massive missed opportunity. You've got to credit Bahrain for the fight back. Obviously, it was a fluky goal to get them back in it. But after that goal went in, they didn't step down. They stepped up to the challenge, and they were like, right, we're back in this now. And if we nab another goal here, it'll put us ahead, put us in a good position. And, they were obviously they weren't expecting 10 minutes of added time at the end of the game there, which, allowed for that equaliser for Australia. But credit to Bahrain for the fight back, but Australia really should have put that to bed in the first half.
Yeah, that 10 minutes of additional time, of which I reckon we played about 4, by the way. But Christian, it's an interesting point that Jacob brings up, the fact that the Bahraini team really came back into it in terms of their intensity and just intent after they scored that goal. It's been a consistent theme for the Socceroos that we've talked about over the last couple of weeks, but really not bringing that intensity from our side of things until we go down has been a real trend.
Yeah, and once we went 1-0 up, like Jacob said, I think we played a bit better football, a bit more relaxed. But, towards, midway through the second half, towards the start, you could sort of sense that, we weren't really trying to go for that second, if that makes sense. And that's how we sort of allowed Bahrain to slowly creep back into the game. And not that I saw the goals coming, but you could see that Bahrain had a bit more intensity about themselves. And then, it was Australia sort of, backing off slightly. And away from home, Australia, we know historically always struggles to play in the Middle East. So, before coming into this game, Popovich knew that this is going to be a test, right? And, after that 38-second goal to open things, Popovich thought, okay, let's just try and, settle things down a bit. Don't go too crazy. And it was all going according to plan. But, I mean, how do you analyze two just freakish goals just conceded? Away from home, like you just don't see that, happening. I mean, for Bahrain to score two goals, it's bad enough that they beat us at home in the opening game of qualifying, and then for this to happen, they've just got so much luck on their side, it seems, at the moment.
Well, but I think with these freakish goals that you talk about, isn't this a consistent thing that happens to Australia? It's always like these deflections off the defender, and it just happens to find its way to a striker, or it goes in the back of the net. It's like, at what point is it, the side making their own misfortune by, just making these little mistakes that lead to, a deflection or a poor header or, misplaying the ball or whatnot. Like, it seems to happen so frequently with this side that there's got to be more to it than just
I think it's the relative frequency though, like, because Australia's defense has actually been pretty solid, right?
Yeah.
So we don't concede a lot of really well-crafted goals to play through us, or, a few counterattacks here and there, but maybe the actual end number is still relatively even compared to, world football standards. But because we actually do have a pretty good defensive record, maybe they stand out more than normal.
But yeah, I was about to say as well, just those slight mistakes. I mean, Burgess for the first one, should have cleared that better. And then I think it was, who was the second one with that?
Hayden Matthews was the header.
Hayden Matthews, that's the one. I think it's probably a bit harsh, but you just head that out. I think he had time to adjust his body and just head it into at least just throwing even a corner, worst case scenario, just out, directly in front of him. I think he had a bit more time, maybe I'm being a bit too harsh. But it's just little things like that, sometimes in those split moments where in that period where Bahrain were getting on top, it might not have seemed like it, with clear-cut goals from opportunities, but, it was eventuating. You could see it, right? So, I mean, yeah, it's funny because this is a game in which we all thought, like I said before, it was going to be pretty tight, considering the history. But I think we definitely looked a lot more threatening once we arrived in and around the box. But, here we are saying how it's still not good enough considering, arguably the Socceroos should have had probably at least another couple of goals, Yangi in particular. So, which again sounds harsh, but it's just the reality of international football and World Cup qualifying where the margins are this thin. So yeah, in terms of the group and how it stands, it's going to be, such a tense, last 4 games to round it off.
Chris, we've had a couple more days to reflect on it now and think on it in a little bit more detail. But specifically on Yengi as well, obviously, I think we've come to the agreement that he scored 2, which is great, probably could have scored more. But then the question is there anyone else that we could throw in there? And obviously Mitchell Duke is the obvious comparison that would actually do a whole lot better than that.
Well, that's the question, isn't it? And we talked about it the other day. I don't know that I've really progressed or developed on it too much further. I'm open to there being other suggestions, but I don't think there's anyone that jumps out at you. Like, I think anyone else, you're taking it's not even an educated gamble. You're taking a real gamble. Like, you're either looking to the future or you're going back to someone who's going to serve us for a little bit. Duke obviously has had his ups and downs anyway, so it's not like we're bringing him back in as a solid replacement who's started and been an absolute goal poacher up front for us consistently. And I don't think anyone can say with confidence if Mitchell Duke had been in that same situation, he scores more than 2. So, I don't know. I'd love to again. We know that I always have a bit of a gold eye when I look at things. I'd love to say former Newcastle Jet Apostolos Stamatolopoulos could be the future, but I think I'm a bit optimistic there. There's guys we can take gambles on. I just don't think there's anyone that you're saying, look, if we put anyone else in there at the moment that they're going to do a better job than Yengi did. I think we're better off to be investing and further developing him and giving him the opportunity, backing him in. But again, how long do we do that for? A little bit like we did with Duke. It's it's one of those things we don't really have a production line still of world-class strikers.
I think Yengi is the answer. Sorry, Lockie, to cut in. I think, for me, moving forward, Yengi is the answer. And I've said it that he's my preferred pick at number 9 in previous, international windows. I mean, I understand what Duke offers in terms of the work rate and making defenses tired, which I think you pointed out, Lockie, in the last podcast, how Duke, putting in a hard shift for maybe 70 odd minutes and then coming off wouldn't be such a bad thing in the short term, which I get to a degree. But then I guess you have to think, would Popper rely on someone who doesn't put in the defensive yards? And the answer is probably not. And, Popper, a coach who prides himself a lot on that from his players to get that output. So, although Yangi doesn't offer that same work rate as Duke, I'm not saying that, but I feel as though he still does a reasonable job anyway. And on top of that, I think he's more of a proven goal scorer, at least early on. So, I mean, for me, it's sort of a no-brainer, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Cassini Yengi is the future. Just his body type and the way he works. Yeah. And he definitely has shown that game he's got a bit of a poacher style to him as well, which we haven't really seen. Like, the closest comparison is probably Jamie McLaren, and obviously his physical profile is a lot different. But to have someone big and strong, good in the air, obviously, and then have that poacher's instinct, I think is quite valuable for the long term. Jacob, what about the raft of changes overall? Because there's also another argument to say, well, yes, slightly weaker opposition in Bahrain. We're not expecting as much for them, but Popovic made, 6 changes to his starting 11 for what could have been a vitally important win, especially when we add the context of Saudi Arabia losing against Indonesia. It's a big, big chance to go 3 points clear.
Yeah, it's funny as well, because in the build-up to it, I was saying, I wouldn't expect him to make many changes. And then he goes and changes half the squad.
Well, even from like Japan to Saudi Arabia was just the one change.
Yeah, it was a massive surprise to see such a different lineup out there. Like, it feels like something that Arnie would have done, right? He had a knack of changing squads quite significantly from game to game. And it was almost everyone always asking the question of, is he still experimenting to find his best 11? So I do sort of wonder what the intent was here, whether it was a case of obviously a few players who haven't had as many caps and as much experience at this level, giving them the opportunity to get some against Bahrain. But then it's such an important match. Is that the smart way to do it? Obviously, Yengian was a clear, right, Duke hasn't been scoring goals. What is it now? 12 games he's played for Australia in a row without scoring. Let's bring Yengi in and see if he can put some away, and he did, which is pretty good. And then obviously there were a few youngsters that played throughout, and we mentioned Hayden Matthews, who, look, I thought that he's going to be, that mistake is going to be what everybody remembers him by for, in this game. And I don't think he was as bad as that, if that makes sense. Like it was an unfortunate moment for sure, but I don't think it was like he had a terrible defensive performance and that mistake was coming and that's just, it happens. It just happened to happen to him in that game. And, I thought he wasn't terrible. Yeah, I was surprised though that Popovic did make so many changes to the squad, but then also kind of not surprised, because that is how he changes things, and we've spoken about this before, right? He doesn't like to mix things up tactically too much, but he does like to change personnel around if things aren't working, and I think that's probably what we saw a little bit here. Was it hasn't felt like Australia have been firing on all cylinders. Recently, and so perhaps this idea of making 6 changes to the starting lineup was this opportunity to get some fresh blood in and see if they can get the team going again, and it looked like they did, right? And I think had Australia scored that second goal, that third goal in the first half, everyone would be going, oh, fantastic performance. We're back in it now. Popper's changes worked brilliantly, but it was a 2-2 scrappy affair by the end of it. And it's like, was that the right move? Should he have just played the sort of full strength side that he has done in the past? It sort of goes back and forth. I'll just say that, I was surprised to see so many changes, because I thought that really the only clear one was Goodwin in. But 6 changes is a lot, even for somebody like Popper, who he tends to look to personnel changes. That's still a lot for him.
One of the other surprising ones, Christian, I've been waiting to ask you this for a couple of days now. Matt Ryan over Joe Gauchi. What did you make of, number one, just the decision to bring him in the first place? You didn't really have a lot to do in the game itself.
No, he didn't. I mean, initial reaction, I saw the lineup, I thought, has Gauchi picked up a knock, or is it more tactical? Maybe he wanted Ryan in there for more of the leadership. I mean, like I touched on before, very difficult place to travel to Bahrain. Maybe he just wanted someone at the back with a bit more experience, perhaps. Because besides that, I don't think Gauchi has barely put a foot wrong, in the time that he's sort of started under Popovich. So that's why it took me by surprise a bit that he's just all of a sudden thrown Ryan, straight back into the deep end, really, not having played a single minute for Roma in the Italian league. So I think that just came as a massive shock to me. I don't know about you guys, if the decision was warranted. I know in the end it didn't really make much of a difference, considering Ryan, like you said, like it didn't really have much to do. I think it was more to do with the leadership and the experience. That's what all I can put 100%. It down to, really.
Yeah. I wonder, I was listening on the Suited and Booted podcast the other day. They had Joe Gauchi on, and he admitted that playing with the ball out from his feet is one of his weaknesses that he is trying to work on. And the thing tactically, Chris, that I could point to as to why you would pick Ryan over Gauchi in a game like this, Jackson Irvine was saying specifically they've worked a lot on playing out from the back, right? And using that to be able to get themselves into matches and not going under the hammer the first 10, 15 minutes and really being able to play out and control the early phase of the game, which, essentially created the goal in the first minute, to be honest. The first 30 seconds, they went backwards. They were able to play out of that corner. Hayden Matthews did well as well in that circumstance and then move forward. So maybe that's the reason why Matt Ryan was picked here.
Yeah, my thoughts sort of reflecting on it was sort of a combination of what you've said and what Christian was touching on. I think the fact that there is an obvious propensity and want to play out from the back, and it, as you said, it delivered results very early in that game. But also the fact that we had the likes of Matthews there at the back, and if we're playing out, we've got inexperienced players that haven't played at that level in a very hostile environment that Christian was talking about. Throwing the fact that we had another handful of young players thrown in as well, it was almost like some of those other changes, plus the push on that tactic. Matt Ryan might have been a bit more seasoned head, just a bit calmer. Yeah. The balance of both those, and the fact that he is clearly more comfortable and very comfortable playing the ball out and pushing forward. That sort of combined to leading to him being there over Joe Gauchi. But I mean, I think we're all pretty clear that Joe Gauchi seems to clearly be the future there. It's just a matter of when do those two eras fully transition from Matt Ryan and a phenomenal era.
We saw the Gauchi errors, eventuate last week in that Saudi game, especially in that first half, where we thought, okay, he's looking a bit shaky here in a couple of these, where a couple of blocks got in. He was very untidy at times with his feet, and that's probably another reason why Popovich opted for Ryan, just to that reassurance in defense away from home, to try and shore up the defense a bit. It was just unfortunate that there were just a couple of, like I said, freakish goals that took place, and that had nothing really to do with Ryan or the team selection or the tactics or anything like that. It was just so I mean, I expect Gauchi to come back in sooner rather than later. Or maybe Popovich might stick to Ryan. I don't know.
Well, when you say soon, Christian, of course, the soon in an international men's football context
later.
is March.
It's all relative, Lockie. It's all relative.
It is all relative. So, March 2025 is when the Socceroos will play next. Those fixtures, home to Indonesia and then away to China. For me, they read as the don't get yourselves eliminated games. Get at minimum 4, hopefully 6 points to take yourself out of any danger of being in that bottom 2 and being eliminated from the World Cup. And then we move to the June games, which will be at home to Japan and away to Saudi Arabia. And that's the ones where we want to push for top 2 in the window. And that's the automatic qualification phase, right? So if we do get the 6 points in the first one, then probably just a win against Japan or maybe even a draw against Saudi alone could do it because of how this group is so close. Jacob, literally anything could happen. We have no idea, but it is going to be a long while away, right? So players' forms are going to change. I'm assuming it'll be a vastly different squad probably. Popovich will have a lot more time to think. We know he was thrown in the deep end here, didn't have a lot of preparation time. So a lot more of an opportunity to just sit back, reflect on the first 4 games in his tenure, and then come up with a really structured plan moving forwards.
Yeah, and I mean, the best case scenario is that these teams continue to cannibalize each other, and give Australia that best chance to, where they can get points that are going to help them out. But it's a long time ahead, and by that point in time, all these teams that are also struggling could be better. Australia could be better, and then it's still going to be extremely tight, or they could all get better and Australia could stagnate, or the opposite, or whatever. Right? There's so many unknowns to this, especially with it being so far away, and like you said, expect it to be a completely different squad. There's going to be the core there, of course, that we've sort of come to know from this team, because you want those players that are established, have that experience. We spoke about Matt Ryan and his leadership. Those sorts of players can be huge for a squad in international football. But yeah, you mentioned those sort of player forms, and it's those fringe players that are going to be most susceptible to that. You think your Anthony Caceres's, those sorts of players who, might only be in for this window. If his form drops, there's absolutely no guarantee he'll be back again in March, and it might be another midfielder that gets the spot over him. So it'll be a different squad. And Popovic now, really, that window, there's no excuses for him. He'll have had the time to really work on things. Like he said, he's had these sort of 4 games as really a trial by fire, I guess, because they've been such important games. And he's not completely burnt alive yet. He might be a little bit singed after this Bahrain game, but he's still going, and the team is still going. And this next window is going to be huge, and it's going to be like you said, those 4 points. Ideally 6 points in those first 2 games in March is going to, set the team up for success. But I mean, you look at them, they're not easy games, right? We say this all the time, there's no easy games, but away to China especially, that is going to be an incredibly difficult match. And
I can see an easy game.
What, for China?
At home? No. One of the Socceroos' games upcoming, I reckon at home to Japan, I reckon Australia will win. Because Chris mentioned in the YouTube video.
Sorry, you'd call that an easy game.
You call that,
easy game. Easy game. Pencil in the 3 points.
You've drawn a long bow. You've drawn a very long bow.
Pencil in the 3 points, I'm telling you.
All right, we'll pencil those in. I'm a little more concerned now, and Lockie, we talked about this on the YouTube, of a couple more slips in there, and all of a sudden, don't worry about, like we're talking about, do we get automatic qualification? And we talked about it. With how tight it is, the difference between automatic qualification and goodbye is so tight right now. We cannot afford to stuff up. We need, as you said, 4 points, realistically 6. Apparently, we're getting another 3 in the next window in June. So never mind. Japan might lose every game from here, and we'll go to the top somehow.
Yeah, and that's the context that we've been talking about this whole campaign with, is that we probably should qualify automatically, but even if we don't, we still have this buffer. Well, the exact same scenario that is giving us easier access to automatic qualification is also making it easier to drop out completely. So it's a very, very fine balance. In terms of the home games for those next 2 windows, Indonesia and Japan, they haven't been announced yet in terms of where they're going to be played. I dare say there might be a few Indonesian fans heavily engaged with Brisbane football at the moment for one reason or another. And then Sydney is yet to receive their game in this phase of qualification. So for me, Christian, Brisbane Suncorp Stadium for Indonesia, and then Stadium Australia for the Japan game seems like the obvious picks.
Yeah, for me, that's exactly how it's going to play out, especially that Japan game. I see it being in Sydney and Sydney only. I believe, the last few have been in Sydney, those big ones, those big qualifying games at home to Japan. And that's what you need, the big stadium, the hostile atmosphere to try and get the Socceroos, over the line, hopefully. And, just with the Indonesia game, hopefully a few Indonesians join our live stream. We can get a few more viewers there. That's all we care about.
Hopefully 3 points as well. And finally, before we move on from the Socceroos today, an interesting piece from James Dodd for the aleagues.com.au today. It turns out Marin Jakalic, we've been talking about him potentially being called up to the Socceroos, Chris. Apparently, he is actually not eligible. Now, his father spent the first 15 years of his life in Australia, but the very important asterisk on that line is that he was actually born overseas, and at 1 month old, got on a boat, spent the 2 and 3 months of his 3-month life at sea, and then arrived in Australia. So because of that fact, he has no parents and no grandparents that were actually born in the country. So he doesn't fit that eligibility criteria for FIFA. So if he were to play for the Socceroos, he would have to live in the country for 5 years continuously. And he's only in his second at the moment. So we have heard from Jakalic before his dreams to play for the Socceroos, and it's actually really unfortunate the way it's played out, because he wasn't aware of this, and he had a conversation with the Bulls staff. All of a sudden, that dream has kind of been ripped away from him, and it's nothing that he had in his control either.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I know it's something he's touched on a number of times in press, and look, he's already found obviously a really good connection with the A-League and the fans, but it now means we do rely on that residency rule as the residency rule in 5 years, which then when you realistically look at it, another 3 years from now, he turns 28 in a couple of weeks. That makes him 31. I mean, he's certainly not past his prime by that point, and if he can continue to sort of form he started the A-League season in, I'd still take Marian Jaklic in our squad at 31, I think, but it's a long time too, as we talked about. Form can be very temporary, so watch this space. Maybe we keep him around for enough years and he becomes an option like Fornaroli did as a late bloomer, but not quite as late as Bruno.
Yes, you're very, very good point. All right, that'll do for the Socceroos. As we've said, we did another whole 20-minute rant right after the game on YouTube if you want more Socceroos chat. But let's get stuck into our look ahead to Unite Round, one of the marquee fixtures on the A-League calendar, at least for this year. We have no idea what's going to happen next year.
Yeah.
I assume a lot of that will come down to the success or non-success this weekend. But the good news, Jacob, straight off the bat, the trains will be running.
Yeah.
We had a brief little scare. The train union or the bus and train union, whatever it was, transport, planned a strike for this weekend. We've learnt today on Thursday the New South Wales government have reached a deal with the rail union. So there were going to be plenty of issues, but thankfully that is no longer the case.
Yeah, big relief for, I'm sure, a lot of the fans that are going to be travelling over there that were panicking, thinking, oh, what are we going to do to arrange transport? And I saw stuff on social media about people like arranging carpool threads and saying, if you're driving to this game from this area, let me know and we can carpool and we can do this and that. So yeah, it was getting crazy. I mean, Uber were going to be making a killing this weekend if the strike stayed around. But no, it's great that'll be an option, especially with the move to Kogarah, because as we've mentioned, that's serviced by the train line. There's a station, like a 5-minute walk away. So, that was a huge draw to moving it there. Obviously, the main reason was the pitch at Leichhardt, but one of the big benefits is that there is a train station so close, and that wouldn't have been available for all those fans that wanted to go. I would have been able to go for free as well now, as the announcement is, with all the dub games are going to be free attendance, which is pretty cool. Could you imagine all of those people not able to get there because of the trains? It would have been an absolute nightmare. So no, it's great that something was sorted out between the union and whoever it was, whether it was the government or whatever that the issue was with. I don't know. I'm not up to speed with it, to be honest. But yeah, fantastic that there's been a resolution to it, because it would have been a nightmare for fans. And it means that it can be a little bit less stress-free, right? People can get to games how they want to get to games. There's no real reasons for there to not be people at the game. And that's going to be the big thing, right? We said we don't know what it's going to look like next year, if it's even going to be a thing. If the fans turn up and show good support to it, and we've seen the APL and some of their activations and initiatives that they're doing in the fan zone and things, excuse me. It seems like they're going all in on it this year. And so the fans need to turn up, and it would have just been another excuse for them to try out and say, oh, well, the trains weren't running, that's why people weren't there. It's like, no, they weren't there because they weren't there. But now we know for sure. And I'm just praying and hoping that a bunch of people turn up and that we all have a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was rumour when we mentioned it on Tuesday, but confirmation that all the A-League women games have been moved from Leichhardt to Kogarah. And as you say, free admission for everyone now to those games, which will be good to hopefully get crowds into the A-League women as well. Let's move on. The squads are in, headlined by some massive boosts to the Sydney derby on Saturday night. Club captain and number one goalkeeper for the Wanderers, Lawrence Thomas, is in for the first time this season. And Christian, Sydney regained Joe Lolly from his hamstring as well, which is incredibly valuable for the Sky Blues. Douglas Costa still in the squad. He was there last week, sat on the bench. But Ufuk Talay said he would be down to a late fitness test. So at minimum, one big boost for either team. And then we'll have to wait and see on Costa as well.
Yeah, sometimes with these massive fixtures, these derby-like games, it can be so easy just to rush, your star players in because you really want that result, don't you? But at the same time, with these sort of core players, you really need to be careful because we've already seen Sydney sort of suffer just a bit of a rough patch, without Lolly and Costa. And, that was one of our questions, heading into the past few weeks is, can they sort of sustain the high quality level that we saw from them, during preseason in Asia, and then obviously the first couple of games in the regular competition in the A-League. So I think, definitely having at least one of those players back will definitely give Tally a huge boost. especially given the nature of it. Wanderers, that obviously Sydney won the first derby in the opening game. I think, who knows, Mata might get the nod. I mean, I think you tipped Jacob, or it was you, Lockie, that you said Mata would start from the get-go. So, there's a lot of different questions that, to be determined from both sides. But I'm just hoping for an entertaining game, because if you want to, put this game scheduled for Unite round, you really hope that, it lives up to the spectacle, lives up to the hype, and hopefully we do get that.
Yeah, they were saying on Total A-Leagues that Mata and Stajic had a meeting during the week. I think the catalyst for that was those Ben Calfalo quotes that came through.
Yeah.
I'm disgusted.
Was Ben Calfalo in the room?
Maybe. I don't know. But anyway, it'll be really interesting to see what comes out of that. Chris, while we're on the derby, there was a picture that emerged throughout the week on Instagram of some of the Sydney FC and Wanderers players playing golf together, which is an interesting vibe. Now, just to give all the information that we actually do know, this is a photo shared by Tom Heaton, who, as far as I can tell, is an amateur golfer, tagged a few of the players from either side in a photo out on the golf course one day. Now, there were 6 or 7 tags in there, which is too big for one group at a golf course. So we don't exactly know who played with who, how buddy-buddy they were. But even just in a hypothetical sense, if you were a Sydney or Western Sydney fan, don't know if you'd be too happy about your players having a round with the enemy, especially in Derby week.
Well, I certainly wouldn't, to put it in my lens. I wouldn't be happy if I saw the Jets boys having a hit halfway down the Central Coast with the Central Coast this week. The only excuse I can potentially give them is that the A-Leagues, as part of Unite Round, had a A-Leagues Ambrose, and that's what they were participating in their separate groups, and just happened to be getting a photo as one group played up on the other. That's the only reason that you could have that this could be okay.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't seem like a great look. And Jacob Vince Rigari put out a piece on this. I think he hit the nail on the head quite well. It's all about how it looks, right? Yeah. And I think we know that when we hear really strong quotes, and for all of his faults, I think Marco Rudan did it very well when he was head coach of the Wanderers, to fire up the derby and get people interested and really make it an us versus them kind of thing. I think we can all kind of accept that they always don't mean exactly everything they say, but it's about building up the rivalry. The league benefits from it. The clubs benefit from it. By virtue, the players then benefit from it. So when information like this comes out, it's not necessarily unbelievable. They're allowed to have a social life, but it just breaks the what am I looking for here? The suspension of disbelief. There you go. Thank you. It just breaks that, and it lets us behind the curtain, and then all of a sudden a little bit of fire, a little bit of tension just leaks out of it.
Yeah, you're right. These are the games. I mean, this is the draw card for the league, but all rivalry games, Chris, you touched on the F3, you think the original rivalry, the Big Blue, these games, they are the draw cards for these supporters every season. It's the ones you mark on your calendar sort of thing. And, to see the players mingling, they're professional footballers. A lot of them would have, played together for years and know each other quite well and things like that. It does sort of suck to see them being kind of friendly with each other, though. That is, I think, the big thing. But you're right that you do need to sort of stoke these fires a little bit. And Marco Rudan was obviously very good at that. And that was one of the first things he did when he came into that job with the Wanderers was like, we are from the West, we're different. This is like sort of almost an isolationist policy of we want nothing to do with anybody else in the league. We are our own thing. And look, it was a problematic figure and a problematic reign for him, but that was something that worked really well. And it sort of took what the derby, it was sort of simmering out a little bit, obviously, with the two clubs, neither of them having played at home for a long time with the redevelopment of their stadiums. That came back. This sort of fire came back into the derby. The crowd started to come back. We saw the tifos, the displays from the crowds, the atmospheres, and it's all started to come back. So I think they just need to quickly put the lid back on this before they let some of that magic escape, because it would be a shame to see it. Look, one picture with a few of the players playing golf together isn't going to be the be all and end all, but it's something that you don't hope to see, and it's something that you hope isn't a regular thing. By all means, go and play golf together. Like, that's fine, but perhaps don't post about it on social media, or if you do it in a I beat him because he's from the wrong club.
But don't even play golf in this week. Why play it in this week? You can go play golf in social life. But
sorry, let me jump in here. So There were some quotes from Jordan Courtney Perkins in that piece from Vince, who said he actually didn't know that they were there until he showed up, which is understandable, right? And like, it's just
There's a lot of
unfortunate.
golf courses in Sydney.
Well, from how it read, right, Tom has then invited a bunch of people who potentially didn't know each other were there, but it's still, and it was his post as well. It wasn't any of the players that posted on their social media. So there are a few asterisks, but it's the point still remains, Christian, that one of the easiest things players from these clubs could do to elevate the league, elevate this fixture specifically, is to just enhance the rivalry and the dislike between these two clubs. And whatever way it's come about, this is, worked backwards on that.
Yeah, and I think you've got to take into perspective, this means more for the fans than it does the players, especially if you're a marquee player or a foreigner, for example. You're not going to take the derby or the rivalry as seriously or as to heart as maybe a local player, as like Milanovic, for example. Like for him, it would mean a bit more personal to him. And for the fans, you've got to understand that it doesn't matter if it's social or whatever. Like before a derby, that's going to hurt, right? End of. Yeah. So I know, like in the context of it, they didn't post anything on social media on their own accounts. That would have been a different, story, different topic of conversation we would have been having. But yeah, again, it's just unfortunate that it's sort of all come out in this light beforehand. But you've got to understand why fans would be angry at it just so recently, before a derby. To take place during the weekend, during Unite round as well. Like you said, you want to try and build this, intense fixture. It's sort of, coming back up again, where it's sort of died down a bit the past few seasons. It's getting back up. So, yeah, it's just unfortunate the way it's played out.
I think the piece is, as we've said, there's a perception there, and I don't know that I necessarily... Well, I agree, but I don't agree with what you're saying, Christian, in terms of it not meaning as much to the players. The fans need the perception that it means as much to the players as it does to them, because the fans are the ones that pay the players' wages through putting their bums on seats, going to Unite Round, doing all these other things. So that's what we need to see from them. So for, a week before and a few days after, you've got to wear that rivalry, you've got to wear the result as well, and you've got to live it, because that's what the fans are investing in, and that's what we need to see. That said, I do really like my idea. I think the A-League next year for Unite Round should get some sort of golf thing going on in the lead-up on the Wednesday, where there's a chance for fans to play alongside a couple of players in an Ambrose or something. I don't know how they'd work it out, but imagine what that would be like as an experience on the Wednesday leading into Unite Round.
That'd be great. The Pro-Am. Can we get involved? That'd be great. I'm pretty sure we were talking about ins and outs in the squad, so let's go back on that horse. Perth regained Josh Risdon from injury, which will be big for them. Obviously, their defensive struggles have been well documented.
Struggles.
Yeah, well, true. As well as David Williams, who came off the bench and scored a bunch of goals last year. For Wellington, victory. One out for either side. Tim Payne picked up, it was described as a gluteus muscle injury whilst playing for New Zealand on international duty. And then we know about Nishan Bulupale's ankle as well. Bruno Fornaroli is in the extended squad, but he's been listed on a Thursday the last couple of rounds as well, with 2 to be omitted to the match day squad. So that's standard there. And then Jacob for MacArthur and Auckland. The Bulls still miss Jed Drew, and Auckland are bringing in Max Matter. That is the New Zealand international, but another in for them as well. Anything stand out for you there?
I mean, Jed Drew has been such a key part for the Bulls, that he's obviously that's such a big player to be missing for them, and a big game against Auckland as well. Auckland, it's going to be their first game in Australia this season, and can they keep up with that? And we'll get to that in a little bit anyway. But yeah, I mean, to be missing Jed Drew in this game, that's huge for them. Fornaroli in, I think he will be in the final matchday squad, to be honest, with Valupale's injury now. It's sort of almost all hands on deck, and he's an available attacker, who's proven experience. Okay, he's not been in form recently, but you've got to go with what you've got, and it would make sense to keep him in. But there's nothing that's screaming as going, this is going to be game changing for the team. It's Tim Payne. Yeah, that kind of sucks for the Phoenix, but he can be quite inconsistent at times, and I think he sort of gets caught between the sort of two roles that he's asked to play in and out of possession a lot. He gets caught in transition quite a bit. So, perhaps for the Phoenix, in Sydney against a strong victory side, perhaps actually having a player who's a bit stronger in transition is going to help out there and help settle the team in what could be a really big game for them. So there's nothing that's screaming at me as going, this is going to be a massive difference maker for the team. I think probably Jedru is the one that's still for MacArthur. They're going to feel his absence because he's been a focal point of the attacks for them this season. But I mean it's pretty standard. There's like I said, nothing that really stands out for me.
All right, well, why don't you roll us into our weekend look? You said you were going to hear more from Auckland in a bit. Let's get straight to it with a burning question.
Can Auckland keep up their run of form away from New Zealand? So obviously, first 3 games of the season have all been in New Zealand for them. Can they keep that up on the trip down to Sydney, to Australia? It's obviously something that the Phoenix last season they had to sort of adjust to, and Italiano made deliberate changes tactically to try and give themselves the best opportunity here in Australia, which sounds crazy, but it worked for them. Are Auckland going to do something similar and change the way that they play, or are they going to keep up with how they have been going, and will that work? And does the travel play into things? Does the occasion of it being Unite round play into things? Who knows? But for me, they've looked a really strong side so far, especially for myself. I didn't know quite how to place them coming into the season, having not seen them play, but they look to have the goods. It's can they keep that up now in what's a really big away trip for them?
Chris, what's yours?
It's the Central Coast Mariners. How bad is this slump? They've had an horrific start to the season when we have a look at where they've, stacked up across it. Even when we look across both leagues that they're participating in, they're just not getting wins. Draws are the best that they're coming with, and even they're not pretty. If they can't get the result this week against a Newcastle Jets side that's, let's be honest, not showing themselves to be even the side they were last year just yet, then they're going to be in a lot of trouble. If they can't break this losing streak now and find that first win of the season, and remembering they're playing in 2 competitions. I know one of their marquee signings is still out of action with Sainsbury, but these are things you have to deal with as a football club, and there's going to be questions, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on Mark Jackson, I think, if they can't turn it around very soon. And Friday night's the night. I hope it's not the case. But it's now or never, I think, for the Mariners.
Yeah, I'm going a little off track here. I heard Daniel McBreen talk the other day. He was saying, looking at I think it was the bottom 5 on the ladder currently, he was already putting the line through. I don't quite agree with all of those selections, but I think if the Mariners lose here to the Jets, I'm pretty much ready to put the line through them to make finals this year. It's I know we're still early in the season, but it's really getting that dire. Christian, what's your burning question?
I've picked your favourite club, Lockie, in the A-League, and that is Brisbane Roar. Because you've been hyping them up so much. So my burning question is, will we see any form of dominance from Brisbane this round? So what I mean by that is, the first opening few games, I think 3 games they've played now, Auckland, they dominated possession 60-40, I believe it was. Victory a couple of weeks ago, it was about 70-30. So Zakovic came out after both games and said, okay, we really dominated the game. We had a lot of the ball, a lot of possession. I'm really pleased with this aspect. But in the game in particular against Victory, I thought, yes, they had a lot of the ball, but they didn't really do anything with it. So again, in this game against Adelaide, I want to see, okay, if you're going to dominate, because it's a big chance to dominate against, I think, this version of Adelaide. It could be a case of, both teams having a fair share of the ball, maybe 50-50, but how are Brisbane going to utilise the ball? Can they, take their opportunities? And even a game against Sydney FC a few weeks ago when they just lost 3-2 at home. Yes, Sydney possessed them, but Brisbane had a lot of, you could say, a few clear-cut chances, and Zakovic pointed to that and said, yep, that's another good sign. So it's can they, sort of mould it all together and put in a really consistent performance against Adelaide? That's, my burning question.
Well, in the form of Jacob Stevens, we'll hear more about Brisbane later. But my burning question is how much of the APL improved the Unite round experience? Obviously, they had a very short runway last year, and we all know that the grand final decision is how we got here in the first place. So last year was just a stopgap. It had to happen, and they didn't have any choice about it, really. But they've had 12 months here to assess what went wrong, and a lot did go wrong last year. They've had time to plan and prepare. On the surface, all the plans that we've seen publicly look really good, that we've been very impressed with. Obviously, the A-League women's venue change is unfortunate, but I think they've got ahead of that the best they possibly could in the circumstances they were provided with. So all seems good on the surface, but yes, I'm very keen to get up there and see how it is in person. And Jacob, I think that leads in nicely to your worst case scenario.
Yeah, worst case scenario is that nobody actually turns up. The APL have gone to all this trouble of trying to improve things, and nobody shows up.
Pessimist.
This is a worst case scenario, Christian.
It's a worst case, yeah. Jacob, don't be a pessimist. Lots of us are going. Most of the people that matter on this podcast are going. Sorry, Christian, I couldn't help myself.
To be fair, I did build this segment for Jacob as well.
But no, that is a worst case scenario, is that nobody turns up to Unite Round after all this effort that the APL have put in. So, hopefully it's not the case. But, I was asked to be a pessimist for this bit. So
sorry, by not turning up, what specific number? If there's like an average crowd, do you have something in mind?
I don't know, Christian. It's not predictions. It doesn't matter.
You know what he means.
Yeah.
Numbers like last year, in that realm, right? Like empty looking stands consistently across most of the games.
Yeah.
All right, Chris?
Well, mine is, we talk pitches, they've moved it. What happens if Cogra doesn't hold up to 6 games of football? I don't know that pitch has been used for that much activity in one hit. It is a very big test, and it would be the most, to quote Alanis Morissette, the most ironic of changes if then the pitch all of a sudden started to deteriorate come Sunday, and we get to the grand final rematch with the home side Sydney, and the pitch is a disaster, and because of that game is impacted more than any. So I hope that it doesn't happen. And again, it's not my natural, tendency, unlike our English friend down the bottom here, to find the negative in things. But you asked me for a worst case, and I think that would be absolutely tragic for the APL, because then our wonderful revisionist history will say, maybe Leichhardt might have held up. Maybe it would have been a look pretty. We love doing those things after the fact, don't we?
We do. Yeah. We do, Christian.
Well, originally mine was the bus services going on strike, and then I heard the news about the trains, with the whole strike situation, and now that's all sorted. Now it's the trains going back on strike. That would be the worst case scenario. we touched on before how much of a disaster that would be, but not so much for Uber. Like Jacob said, they would rack in the cash, so for them it'd be a positive. But yeah, if something else happened there, another sort of strike, that would be absolute nightmare.
I've just realised I've gotten a little bit ahead of myself, because my worst case scenario that I wrote down a couple of hours ago was that the Mariners lose to the Jets, and I write the line through them for the season. And apparently I felt the need to interject a segment earlier and give it then. But there you go. The Mariners to lose to the Jets. I've already given my reasoning, but I think that would be pretty dire in a football sense from them. Jacob, finally, ping from distance.
Yeah, the Sydney Derby is going to end in a draw. It's been a long time. It's been, 2-3 seasons since there's been a draw in the Derby. So it doesn't happen very often. And I don't know. I just feel like it's one of those weird things that could happen, especially with all the build-up around it being Unite Round, second Derby of the season. Wanderers are starting to find some form. Sydney still look good. And then it just ends in like a 0-0 or a 1-1 draw. And it's just, of course. And so, I just think that perhaps there's going to be a draw in the Sydney Derby this time round.
Chris?
Well, mine's directly in contest with Jacob, so that's good fun. It's Magic Matter wins for Wanderers. He's been a bit maligned. He hasn't had a lot of game time. I think he's going to see a lot of game time, and he's going to be the highlight reel at the end of this. We're going to see a stunning strike from Juan Mata to win it for the Wanderers in the Derby.
Nice. Hopefully he starts and gets that goal early. Right, that'll be good. Christian?
Mine's the Bulls to beat Auckland by at least a few goals. This is like a massive ping, I know, but I just think... What are you saying, 2-3, Chris? I'm not putting a number out there.
A few's 3, so I'm just clarifying that.
Okay, well, Jacob didn't clarify his crowd attendance, so I'm not going to clarify mine. So, Jacob's burning question before was, can Auckland sort of keep up this form, away from home? It'll be their first game away from New Zealand. I just think first game away from home, they might, suffer a bit of a hiccup, Unite Round. I think, I don't know, the occasion sort of set for MacArthur to put a big performance in. I just see a good win for MacArthur.
To finish us off, my ping from distance is that Brisbane, coming up again, will show us their full potential. As you say, Christian, I don't think hyping up is maybe the correct phrase. I'm being patient with the Brisbane Roar because of their tough fixture run. I think Adelaide, just like Brisbane's ladder position is underrated because they've come up against 3 teams. I think Adelaide have gotten very lucky to be where they are on 7 points. I think they're more like a 3 or 4 point team at the moment. So I think it'll be a good contest. I think it'll be much more evenly matched than people might expect. And I still think Brisbane Roar have one of the best midfields in the league. I do mean that. Not the best, but, in the top 5 or 6, something like that. So, Jay O'Shea, Keegan Yelosic, who did play out on the wing a couple of weeks ago, but he can play in midfield if you're going to play Berenger as well. And then Waleed Shaw as well if he's not deputising in the centre of defence. So I still think there's plenty of potential in the Roar, and I hope they give us a bit of a glimpse of that. But ahead, the Unite round, of course, a question without notice to all three of you. What specifically about Unite round are you really looking forward to? It may be the last chance we ever get to experience this. Chris, what are you hoping you get out of it?
My biggest highlight is the round ball reunion. It's not really a reunion, but getting the majority of us together for the first time. Yeah, exactly. It might be the union at Unite round, the first and last, as you say. So, looking forward to that, and just looking forward to the football community hopefully coming together. There's lots of great activations and things going on. So, and it's the only time I'll give him ups. But looking forward to third round draft pick Jacob Stevens. Apparently, is it 3 goals you're going to put past Will Booth?
That's right. Well, yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to is putting the boots back on to play a competitive game of football. It's been over a decade since I last played a competitive game of football, unless we're counting the match that I played at my brother's wedding reception recently as competitive football. It's been a long time. So I've been, thinking about, do I go back and start playing again this season? I think this is going to be the litmus test for me. If it goes well here and I have fun, yep, I'm signing up for next season. If I'm rubbish and I hate it, it's not happening. So I am looking forward to it though. I'm going to be operating off of a 4 a.m. wake up and a lot of coffee, but it should be good fun. Yeah,
I'm really looking forward to the following day as well, because the Soccer AM challenge, we're going to line you up. I think you're with Will.
Goodness.
And I forget, you paired up with someone else. I can't remember off the top of my head. Maybe it was Dom, actually. But all the pressure's going to be on. You're going to have lots of eyes on you. Max Rushton is going to be with the microphone. We're expecting big things.
Can I take my boots?
Yeah, absolutely. Take your boots. Because you're going to absolutely hear it from us next week if you fail dismally. So,
can I just say, Lockie, I can't wait to hear if Jacob doesn't go well, his own pessimistic take on why he didn't do well.
We've heard the excuse, right? I haven't played in 10 years. That's going.
I want to see a tactical analysis piece from Jacob after that game.
Yeah.
It's happening. It's happening, by the way. It's talking tactics on the five side is happening. It's
lovely. Christian, I'm assuming you're looking forward to the couch and the TV.
Yeah, nice, relaxing. I'm actually looking forward to not meeting Chris face to face. You've
been avoiding me for a long time, Christian.
You expect that, Chris. I had to go on back on you, mate. But no, I hope you boys obviously enjoy, the whole week we'll have to offer. And I'm looking forward to, how the league sort of embraces the fans and how they're going to improve on it from last year. So yeah, a lot to look forward to, and hopefully it's a huge success once again.
Yeah, and the added context there is that Chris and Christian have been in the same venue with each other, 2 or 3 times now, but haven't quite walked through the same corridor or looked through the same window. So,
Chris's communication is a bit off, so we'll let that.
That's why I'm only a sporadic guest.
Very fair, very on par. All right, that will do for this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. You just heard from all of them, so I'm not going to go through the lineup again. Jacob, Chris, Christian, thank you very much. We hope you enjoy your Unite round as well. If you're travelling up to Sydney, get out and about, get to the fan zone, get to the games. It's going to be a great weekend. If it's the first of many more in this kind of heavily effort-pushing weekends, we look forward to it. If it's going to be the last, that'll be the last opportunity, so why not make the most of it? We will be back on Tuesday in our regular slots. We should all be home by then, hopefully, if all goes to plan and flights aren't cancelled and we get to the airport on time.
I'll be hosting it by myself.
Yeah, you could just be by yourself, or we'll be all on our phones from the hotel room or anything.
Yeah.
But, hopefully all goes smoothly. But thank you all very much for listening. We'll catch you then. Goodbye.